Hey guys, it's Tim, and this is Pro Wrestling Unlimited. As well, you may have heard the news. Vince McMahon got a lawsuit put on him today, and we're not going to talk a lot about like the person itself with the accusations and her personal stuff, because we don't really know too much about her. We just know of the accusations that she actually put out there today regarding Vince McMahon. It says John Laurinaitis in the lawsuit. Now, Brock Lesnar is also kind of mentioned, but not by name, so there's accusations on him as well with a lot of things. But if you are unaware, she's basically suing Vince McMahon for sex trafficking. She's also suing Vince McMahon for a few other allegations as well. And we have on with us Dmitry Shakhnovich. I hope I said that right. Shakhnovich?
That's right.
He is a New York lawyer, and we're just going to talk to him about what could possibly happen to Vince McMahon with all of this going down. I've got a lot of questions that were sent to me today as far as like, hey, is Vince going to go to jail? Is this just going to reach a settlement? What is actually going to happen to Vince? Is he going to be fired from TKO? And we know he already doesn't have like a big presence in TKO anyways. He's more of just a face. They say he's executive chairman, but he really, again, doesn't have much say. But on the surface, what is your takeaway when you first saw this actual lawsuit come up this morning with the Wall Street Journal post and all of that?
Well, it's important at the outset to distinguish between a civil lawsuit and a criminal charge.
Right.
Nobody's going to jail, at least not as a result of this particular lawsuit.
Okay.
Now, the allegations involved may lead to an arrest or a charge or an indictment or something of that sort, but we're not there yet. And those are very different things. The allegations look criminal, right? They emulate what a criminal indictment will look like. But we're not there yet. That's a different process, a different procedure, different authorities that come into play. So it's important to distinguish those two. Jail, as a general matter, isn't on the table now.
Gotcha. So we know that WWE did their own investigation when this stuff first came out, when it was just, hey, Vince McMahon had some female sign an NDA. He was supposed to pay her $3 million, only paid her $1 million. And then they said that nothing was found in the investigation. Now, one question I was asked today is that like true? And I don't know if you know any of this or what could come of this, but what I was asked today was, is it true that they didn't find anything, or could it be that they know more than they are actually telling? And what could that possibly lead to if they know more than they said with their investigation that the WWE and their special counsel did put on?
Look, internal investigations are meaningless, really.
Okay.
You would hope that internal investigations bring about a just result, right? That they don't take into consideration things like business interests and public relations and things of that nature. But they can, right? Internal investigations are governed entirely by internal processes. They aren't accountable to the police. They aren't accountable to courts, to judges, to lawyers, to anybody. But again, you would hope that these internal investigations are on the up and up. But sometimes they're not, and that's just something you have to be resigned to. Now, if you have a public company, which now this all is different, right? Then those shareholders are entitled to view the goings about of the company, and so that changes things a bit. But the TKO thing happened just recently, right? So it's a bit different.
Well, WWE's been a public traded company since 2001. So they've always been, for as long as any of this has gone on, at least since 2001, since this was only from back in 2021 and 2022.
Well, yeah, but the TKO merger is new.
Right.
And while it was public, it's now kind of public on a whole new level.
True.
But if it is a public company, the shareholders are entitled to know what's going on in the company. So that will change it a bit. But internal investigations are not external investigations, right? They aren't police investigations or anything of that nature.
Now, I know maybe a year ago now, they said that the FBI raided McMahon's home and asked for like cell phone records and a bunch of other things. Have you heard anything on that front, if that can lead to anything with the FBI getting involved? Because all we ever heard was they raided Vince's home, they asked for cell phone records and a few other things, and then nothing else came of it.
So I don't know about that, and I don't know whether or not that's true. I will say that, when the FBI searches you and seizes your property, whether that be by way of a search warrant or something else, that's typically an indicator that things aren't going very well, right? They don't do that unless they're really looking at you as a target oftentimes, right? The
Mhm.
FBI is a federal law enforcement agency. The
Right.
federal government allocates money towards investigations, towards the execution of search warrants, towards legal proceedings, and they do it in a meticulous way. They investigate cases well, they prosecute cases well. That's why the conviction rate in federal court is so high, right? Because the FBI knows what it's doing, the U.S. attorneys know what they're doing, and so generally, if a search warrant is executed, if property is seized, cell phone records, that's not indicator that things are going in a good direction.
Right. And I'm reading this here from CNBC, just so you have a little more context on this. They state federal law enforcement agents executed a search warrant on WWE's boss Vince McMahon last month and served him with a federal grand jury subpoena, the company disclosed Wednesday. WWE also revealed Wednesday that Vince McMahon was taking medical leave. He needed surgery. McMahon's leave began on January 21st, and he will, quote, remain on medical leave until further notice. When we reached out for a comment Wednesday, the company said that it believed the subpoena and search warrant are, quote, a continuation of the investigation that commenced last summer. WWE has cooperated throughout and fully understands and respects the government's need for a complete process.
So a grand jury subpoena is exactly what it sounds like, right? It demands somebody's appearance before a grand jury, typically if an indictment is being sought.
Mhm.
Now, there are several ways that you can work with a grand jury subpoena. Oftentimes, prosecutors just have that subpoena issued because they want certain information, materials, documents, things of that nature. They don't really want testimony oftentimes. And it also depends on where you are in their investigation. Are you a witness? Are you a subject, as they say? Are you a target? Right? That will limit how you respond to the subpoena. You can respond to the subpoena in a variety of ways. What you should do, if you have a lawyer that's worth his or her salt, is obviously preserve your Fifth Amendment privilege, right? Because you may need that down the line, particularly if there's a criminal case. Grand jury subpoenas are extremely common. They don't necessarily lead to the person being subpoenaed going to jail or being arrested. They're an investigative tool, and they're very, very commonly used in virtually every district, federal district in the country.
So we know the grand jury got involved and whatnot because it was revealed in WWE's finding that Vince did use company money to pay for the NDAs and whatnot, and he has since paid that back. But could the FBI and stuff still be, or could they still look into it, even though McMahon has reportedly paid it back to the company?
Yeah, so that's not how crime works,
Okay.
right? You can't settle a criminal case.
Right.
Right? That's not allowed. If you could, then every white collar criminal in the world would simply pay back money
Right.
and avoid going to jail, right? So that's not how it works. But
Okay.
it depends on who the victim of this alleged crime is. I don't think it'll be the company under which he paid off these women, right? It's likely going to be the victims here, the women making these allegations.
Mhm. Yeah, because I know in the lawsuit itself, it had stated that Miss Grant would, and her side would like to see this go to a jury trial. So you're saying none of that is criminal in nature as of right now?
Yeah, you also got to remember that when these complaints are filed, right, these are the very beginnings of a
Right.
civil case, not the end. And virtually every case will demand a jury trial,
Okay.
and virtually no case gets to a jury trial, right? Just because of a variety of factors, but primarily because most cases settle, right? The reason that plaintiffs' lawyers include in these complaints jury trial demands and other things, by the way, is so that they won't waive them. Oftentimes in these cases, you have to include certain things at the outset in your initial pleading, or you may waive it down the line. And plaintiffs' lawyers are obligated to protect their clients, and so they do it that way.
So if everything goes with Miss Grant and her side, and then WWE or Vince McMahon just settles on this, you say it could eventually lead to a criminal case. How would that come up, and how would that actually start to take effect if it does get that far?
So it's unrelated,
Okay.
right? Those two proceedings are unrelated. A criminal case may never happen, or it may happen tomorrow, right? We never know. Law enforcement authorities conduct investigations. Those investigations are different than a civil investigation or a civil litigation, right? And it depends on what the status of that is. I will say, look, even if he's charged and indicted, he would still be presumed innocent. Right here, we don't have any of that, so he's really presumed innocent. So we can't really jump to that conclusion. This is very common, right? You have a civil case that includes allegations that may serve as a basis for a criminal indictment. And so naturally, the sirens go off in your head, right? And you connect those two things, but they necessarily shouldn't be connected.
Okay.
It depends on what happens down the line. We won't know. Internal law enforcement processes are secret, and we won't know if and when there's a criminal investigation or if it turns into anything more than that.
And then you're saying that, so that has nothing to do with her and her lawyers.
It has nothing to do with her lawyers. She may be a victim and she may very well be cooperating with criminal authorities, but that's a different case than the case she filed.
So as far as this case, then, she's really just looking for the punitive damages and what she didn't get paid to her that was told to her in the NDA?
Yeah, civil cases are designed to have money paid, right? More often than not, virtually always. And so that's what this case will be seeking as well. And if there's a settlement down the line, it'll involve money, I'm sure.
So usually, and I read a little bit into this earlier, usually cases like this, they settle pretty quickly, I would think. So they just go away, especially with a public company like TKO and WWE.
Oh, you never know. It's possible. You see some of the cases with P. Diddy recently that settled really quick. You never know. It depends. Some defendants say, I'm innocent of these charges. I'm going to fight these allegations. I don't know what's going through Vince McMahon's head. I know he's an older man, and I don't know how that will impact his desire to fight. And look, there's exposure here, right? Because again, these allegations may serve as a basis for an indictment. And what happens in a civil case is you're not afforded the same protections that you are in a criminal case, right? So you may have to engage in discovery. You may turn over documents. You may have to testify at a deposition, right? And all of those things may lead to enhanced exposure on the criminal side. And I'm sure his lawyers are telling him all that.
Right. And McMahon's side did put out a statement today through, I think it was Deadline, where they stated, quote, "The lawsuit is replete with lies, obscene made-up instances that never occurred, and a vindictive distortion of the truth. He will vigorously defend himself."
Yeah, which is common, which happens in every single case. You get that kind of boilerplate denial. That's more for public relations purposes, I'm assuming, than anything else. Yeah. I'm not a public relations guy. I'm a lawyer. But you deny the allegations at first, and then later on we'll see what the evidence shows. If the case doesn't settle, this case will move on to what's called a discovery, right? The document exchange phase, where you're gonna have to turn over emails and text messages and witness names and addresses and everything, and then depositions, where you're gonna have to give testimony under oath as to what actually happened. At a trial, there will be cross-examination and impeachment, and then credibility contest, essentially. And so we're at the very, very beginning, and it really will depend on the energy and the vigor and the desire that he has to fight these allegations.
Right, because I know TKO put out a basically boilerplate statement of, hey, Vince McMahon does not run the company day to day. He doesn't have really as much oversight over the company. And then it says, we as TKO take Miss Grant's horrific allegations very seriously and are addressing the matter internally. Again, like you said with the other one, more boilerplate, just PR speak. Hey, we saw it. We know what's going on. Let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this process doesn't change whether you're Vince McMahon or anybody else. Right. It is now in court. There are deadlines put in place. There are court timelines, and that process will take on a form of its own, as every case does.
So my question regarding the NDA, and both, like, her side says that they believe that the NDA is now null and void because McMahon initially was supposed to pay her $1 million and then $500,000, according to her side, $500,000 for, I think it's 2 or 3 or 4 years, so she gets the full $3 million. He only made the first payment, and then was supposed to make the second payment February 1st of last year. So if McMahon doesn't make any additional payments, does that void the NDA?
Yeah, so an NDA is a contract. That's all it is, right? It's a contract between two parties. And the way a contract works is there's something in the law called material breach, right? So if you breach a contract, that's some inconsequential element of the contract, then that's really meaningless. But if you breach a material term in the contract, such as a payment under an NDA, for example, then that gives the other side the right now to breach. The fear is that if you make a mistake and that first breach, in fact, wasn't a material breach, now you're in breach and now you're in trouble. So you play this little game.
Right.
But that's the allegation they're going to make, right? So if they say, we're breaching the NDA, this is why, they have to make that contention. They have to claim that he breached first. Otherwise, they may get into trouble, because I'm sure that NDA agreement includes a whole bunch of liquidated damages and other provisions that indicate that if she breaches, she owes X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, because one of the things that I read today, and I don't know how true this part of it is when the allegations first came out and we learned about the NDA a year ago, I want to say, last July, that's when McMahon's side thought that they breached the NDA, and now their side saying, well, he breached it with not making the payment. And then, so they're both kind of trying maybe to play each other. And that's probably what a way just to see, oh, well, if you breached it first, then your lawsuit has no meaning or anything. Meaning's maybe not the right word, but if she breached it first by telling people, and then, so, because initially what came out last year was the board of directors in WWE got a email that Vince may have been having a relationship with the female on staff. And then that's when all this first came to light. So if she told anybody, is that her breaching the contract first? Even if she told somebody in private?
It depends on the terms of the contract.
Okay.
But let's also keep in mind, by the way, that the NDA portion of this case is different than the sex trafficking portion of this case.
Oh, okay.
Only because somebody breached an NDA, that's fine. They still may have a case for all the other stuff.
Right.
Right. The NDA doesn't relate. You can't say, oh, we had an NDA and therefore all this other stuff goes nowhere. Right. Yes, if the NDA was breached, then perhaps they can put in counterclaims and she can be liable to him for breaching the NDA. Fine. That doesn't do anything with the sex trafficking and all the other allegations of all this horrific conduct that was there.
Right. So
NDA doesn't negate that.
So they're saying that she is alleging WWE, Vince McMahon, and former executive John Laurinaitis with violations of the Trafficking Victims Prevention Act, negligence, civil battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Yeah, those are all common causes of action that engulf this kind of conduct, right? So sexual assault lawsuits, sex trafficking lawsuits, many lawsuits that have been filed in the post-Me Too era involve these kinds of allegations, right? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, battery, negligence, assault, and there are certain specialized laws, rules, and statutes that are designed to address sex trafficking, and that's what we have here.
And that's the one that everybody's talking about, the sex trafficking, and I put it in quotes because it's still alleged, the alleged sex trafficking, I guess you could say, allegations. What could that really lead to with all of this?
Well, it all is designed to lead to money.
Right.
That's what this lawsuit is designed to lead to. Whether or not they can prove any of these allegations are entirely different, and that's what the evidence will show. That's what we will have to wait and see, right? We'll have to wait and see what the text messages show, what the emails show. And the plaintiff's lawyer here will have to dive deep into all of these materials, because right now they're just making allegations. They're relying, I presume, primarily on their client's account of what happened, which happens in every case. And we'll have to see how strong these allegations actually are.
Now, another question that got asked to me today, and I have no clue on this one, you may have an answer. There are text messages in the lawsuit that was filed, but none of the text messages, like, when you look at a text message, it'll tell you at the top who the text message is from. None of the ones screenshotted in the actual lawsuit, like, say, contact name Vince or anything on them. So can those hold up, or are they just going to use those as of now and then ask for phone records going forward?
Well, the funny thing is, if you're a lawyer filing this case, you obviously are bound by certain ethics rules and certain rules that govern your conduct as a lawyer. And, if you're going to put a text message in a federal lawsuit, you would hope, I'm certain, that they verified that text message, at least to the extent that they could. right? Otherwise, they can get in trouble.
Mhm.
And you know, and they could always say that they made a mistake and they thought it was a text message from him or to her, and it wasn't. But you really should do, in a case like this in particular, your due diligence. And I'd be hard pressed to think that the lawyers filing this case wouldn't engage in some verification process, because they know that this case is going to hit the press. They know that the lawyers on the opposing side will be intensive, well-paid lawyers that do their job. And so I'm assuming they wouldn't just throw anything at the wall to see what sticks, particularly as it relates to text messages that are unsubstantiated and things of that nature. But you never know. Look, we'll see.
Right, because like some of the text messages, none of them actually like
Yeah.
they say like baby and this and that, and then at one point, a message that supposedly allegedly comes from Vince does say Johnny, which we assume is in reference to John Laurinaitis. So it's like I said, none of them say like, you know, contact Vince at the top like you would normally see on like an iPhone message or something, or an Android message. So that's another question that was asked to me is, hey, none of these messages, then the screenshots say they're from Vince. How would that work? And like you said, and I assume the same thing, that they probably did their due diligence and they're not going to put falsified things in this claim.
Yeah, look, lawyers are obligated before they file a lawsuit to make sure they're filing a lawsuit that's not fictitious, essentially,
Mhm.
right? They have to not file a lawsuit that is frivolous, as they say. In other words, there has to be some substance there in law or fact. And fabricating text messages or including as screenshots in lawsuits, unsubstantiated text messages in a case like this would be a dangerous endeavor. I don't know if they would go that route.
Right, because like some of them are printed out screenshots, some of them are just regular screenshots. It looks like from the phone, and so, and I do see there's actually, I didn't see this one earlier. There is one that does show the Vince name in the on the contact here. But again, some of them, it's weird. And does that make a difference if they're printed out and then put in this, or if they're just screenshotted from the actual phone?
It doesn't make a difference,
I didn't think
particularly
so.
at this stage. Yeah, at this stage, don't forget, these are all allegations.
Right.
And the burden of proof is simply that they have to plead this with enough particularity to give the other side notice with reasonable detail as to what this case is about. They don't have to prove their case yet. And it's entirely possible there will be text messages that will be produced as time passes, even beyond what you're seeing now.
Right. So, I mean, there's not much more here with the case. Like you said, it's going to take a while. They got to process everything. They got to go through whatever they need to go through to make sure everything is actually legitimate on her side. And could there be a countersuit by McMahon? And if he does, would he have to wait till this is finished to countersuit, or could he countersuit immediately?
No, so what'll happen is once a lawsuit is filed, you get a certain period of time to file your answer, which is basically a set of papers that deny or admit certain of the allegations.
Okay.
And in that answer, you would include your counterclaims. You can include them later on if you don't have enough right now, but you can include them in your answer. And so he can do that at the outset. He doesn't have to wait.
Okay, they see that I wasn't sure of, and that was another thing that got asked to me today. And I'm like, hey, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know any of these stuff. And when you hit me up, and I was like, oh, a lawyer. I've been asked lawyer questions today that I don't have any answers for, so this is perfect.
No problem. I know something about this kind of stuff.
So just to wrap everything up, because I think we really hit on all the main key things. Where do you think all this actually goes? Just a settlement and it goes away?
Yes. Now, look, as far as the civil case, I'm pretty sure that's what happens.
Right.
We don't know where the tentacles will lead. Right. We don't know whether or not this is being investigated by any authorities, and we don't know whether or not this is part of a bigger investigation that they're conducting. These are just things we don't know. We can't jump to conclusions. We shouldn't draw any conclusions from this. Like I said earlier, even if he's charged, even if he's indicted, he's still presumed innocent. He hasn't done any of those things yet, so he's really, really innocent right now. You know, these allegations are discomforting, right? And they sound something that would be criminal, but they're just not right now.
Right.
So I'm interested to see whether or not that happens, just out of pure curiosity.
So, like, the worst thing that could happen at this time is he's got to pay if that ends up. And then, so on the TKO side of things, and I don't know if this falls in line with any of this. That's just all on them. If they eventually say, oh, we want to cut ties or not, that has nothing to do with the lawsuit. They can use the lawsuit as like gravitas for his resignation and his firing. But other than that, nothing legal with this and TKO.
Yeah, well, it depends on what the terms of his connection with TKO are at this point. I don't really know what those are. If he's, I know you mentioned earlier that he's executive chairman.
Right.
I really still don't know what that means. If he simply has effectively an officer position or some employment position that is of high caliber, I presume there are agreements with him in place in that regard, have provisions in there that would allow them to get rid of him for much less than this.
Right.
So they would probably exercise that if they feel the need to.
Yeah, because as of right now, we know that Vince McMahon is listed as executive chairman of the board. I know recently he did actually do the deal to get UFC their show in Saudi Arabia that's coming up. He actually worked that deal. So he is still doing things on the business side for TKO at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And there are several things, he's obviously, my understanding is he's still a shareholder.
Yes.
Maybe he's still on the board of directors. It would depend on the terms of all of those things to see how they can get rid of him if they can.
Yeah, because, I mean, if I'm just going to be completely honest, the way Ari Emanuel, the owner of all this now, has been talking since the merger started, it really sounded like, hey, Vince, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, and then once we fully have control, you're probably going to be out. That's the way it sounded to me, and I've heard others say that as well. It's just a way for them to get control, and then Vince will be gone and given whatever he needs to be given to walk away. So
yeah, and if that's the case, then they don't need it. They need a
True.
whole lot less.
Right. But so like I said, I think we've hit on everything with this case does go. It's more now just sit and wait. Anything else that really comes out is more people just probably trying to pile on. But I don't know, and maybe this is the last thing I can ask you, is more going to come out publicly from her side, or is this basically mostly all of it that we will see or even need to know?
Well, it depends on how fast and if and when the case closes. If the case settles tomorrow morning, then that's all you're going to see, right? Otherwise, eventually the judge will lay out a schedule where both sides turn over their documents. Some sides will turn over certain documents, not other documents. Other materials will be outstanding, and then there will be a fight, I'm sure, in court as to what has to be turned over, what's relevant, what's irrelevant, what will, as they say, tend to lead to relevant evidence, right? So it becomes a legal fight at this point.
Okay, yeah, that's what it's all sounded like. But I just didn't know, like I'm glad I had you on here, because so many people are like, put the man in jail now, put the man in jail now. And I'm glad I had you to kind of differentiate the civil from legal and all that, and criminal and all the different things. So at least some people now have more of an understanding on what this specific lawsuit that filed actually is.
That's right. That's right. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't fill any gaps. Don't draw connections between things that aren't connected or really shouldn't be connected.
I mean, I had one person in my DMs asking me if he's going to end up like Harvey Weinstein.
Not as a result of this.
Right. Okay.
So
what I do want to say again, thank you for joining me here, talking about all of this, giving some great insight, and maybe helping just have other people, including myself, now that I understand even more, understand exactly what this all is, and is more now of just a sit and wait, and we'll see exactly what comes of it. But tell everybody where they can find you, your work, and anything else related to you and your lawyering.
Oh yeah, well, again, Dmitry Shaknovich is my long and annoying name. I'm a lawyer in New York. I practice criminal and I practice some civil stuff as well. And I also run a YouTube channel. You got the tag there. It's youtube.com/@dshacklaw, where I interview folks on the law and sports and other places, and I talk about the law and I analyze things. And so if that's something you want to take a look at, something that may interest you, then please go on and subscribe. I'd appreciate it.
So to meet you again, I want to say thank you so much for coming on here and just clearing some things up that I had questions on, other people had questions on. And I hope you have a great night, great rest of your day. And maybe we'll talk later once more of this does come out, if anything else does come out in the future.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much for having me on. Great time.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.